The Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society podcast. Welcome to the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society, a podcast dedicated to suspense, crime, and horror stories from the golden age of radio. I'm Eric.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Joshua.
We love mysterious old-time radio stories, but do they stand the test of time? That's what we're here to find out.
Today, we return to the listener library for a recommendation from our mysterious listener, Zachary.
Zachary writes, "Hello, I've been listening to your podcast ever since you guys were on episode 37. I have an amazing suggestion for you. It's called Death Robbery with Boris Karloff."
Lights Out was created by writer Willis Cooper in 1934 and quickly gained a reputation as the goriest, most shocking program on radio. When Cooper left the series to pursue a career in Hollywood, NBC hired writer-director Arch Oboler to take his place.
Over the next 2.5 years, Oboler wrote more than 100 plays for the series, establishing himself as one of radio's leading voices. Like Cooper, Oboler's success with Lights Out led him to leave the program in pursuit of other opportunities. Unlike Cooper, Oboler returned to Lights Out many times during his career, usually when he needed a quick buck. This is fortunate for fans today because most of the surviving copies of Lights Out come from these short-lived revival series from the mid to late 1940s.
These later iterations of Lights Out also resurrected a number of Willis Cooper's early scripts for the program, including the play you're about to hear. Sadly, none of the original productions from Cooper's era of Lights Out are known to exist today.
For reasons unknown, most of these later Lights Out revival series were broadcast in the early evening instead of the program's original late-night time slot, including a series in 1945 and 1946. The latter revival did not involve Arch Oboler and was intended as a Willis Cooper best-of series.
Unfortunately, most of Cooper's scripts were deemed too violent and gory for primetime audiences. As a result, the network's best-of series became a least of series, presenting an underwhelming collection of Cooper's tamest, and in some cases, lamest scripts. Yes, I'm looking at you, Battle of the Magicians.
In the summer of 1947, a third and final Lights Out revival series was planned, starring Mr. Catwife himself, Boris Karloff. Once again, Arch Oboler was passed over in favor of 7 vintage Cooper scripts. This time, however, the network chose not to screen the scripts for content. As the story goes, the sponsor, who apparently also failed to review the scripts, was shocked by the gruesome nature of the stories and withdrew their support. ABC canceled the series after only 3 episodes.
The only surviving episode from this truncated run is Death Robbery. Most Lights Out fans believe this is one of the few existing productions of Cooper's Lights Out work that accurately reflects the tone of his tenure on the series. So with that in mind, please enjoy Death Robbery from Lights Out, starring Boris Karloff and Lorene Tuttle. First broadcast July 16th, 1947.
It's late at night, and a chill has set in. You're alone, and the only light you see is coming from an antique radio. Listen to the sounds coming from the speaker, listen to the music, and listen to the voices.
It clicks.
It clicks.
It clicks.
What clicks? The Eversharp Schick Injector Razor, made by Eversharp, manufacturers of Eversharp Schick Injector Razors and Blades, and famous Eversharp Precision Writing Instruments.
Hideous things come out of the darkness to prowl the tortured earth. Evil hands stretch forth to seize. Evil eyes are watching. Unholy voices whisper and quarrel in the fearful silence. Death stalks. Loathsome, horrible death. Dare you put out your lights and listen to Boris Karloff in the story of horror in the deepening darkness? Dare you listen to Lights Out?
I'm glad you brought up the question of ethics, Ed. Sometimes I think science is too ethical. Stands in the way of research.
I don't know, David. Take your work, for example. It's wonderful, but you have to be very cautious. I think working with monkeys is about as far as you should go right now.
Oh, but Ed, David is past that stage. Why not show Ed the one you worked on today, darling?
If you'd like to see it, Ed, it's right in the lab.
Yes, I would. I saw it last night after you injected the poison.
I'll get it, David.
Thank you, dear. It's in the second cage.
Ruth's a wonderful girl, David. Must be a big help to you in your work.
Don't know what I'd do without her. But if she ever gets too interested in pure science, I'm going to lock her out of the lab and just make her go back to being a wife.
How do you find time for a wife?
Now, look here. All you practicing surgeons think the research man is a machine. Not me, Ed. Ruth means more to me than all the discoveries I might make. Her happiness is all I live and work for.
Well, I can't say that I blame you. She's a very charming person.
Here he is.
Same one you saw last night, Ed. Stone dead. And there he is, just as healthy and alive as any other monkey.
Why, it's amazing, David. Naturally, I've followed all the experiments along this line, but you seem to have progressed much farther.
David can't go any farther with animals. He's ready for the next step, and he can do it.
Well, I'm all for research, David. But you have a moral obligation in this sort of thing. How do you know it'll work with human beings?
Oh, you're a surgeon yourself, Ed. You know that human beings are animals just like all the subjects I've used. I know it'll work.
Well, knowing it won't get you far with society. You'll have to submit proof.
I know that, and I've tried every way I can think of to get a human being to demonstrate on.
He's tried insane asylums, penitentiaries, everywhere.
No one will listen to me.
Well, in a way, you can't blame them. Even to me, with my training, the idea seems, well, blasphemous.
My dear Ed, you can't stop scientific progress because of a so-called moral concept.
Besides, what could be less blasphemous than to triumph over death?
I'm sorry, but I can't see it that way. I wouldn't want to try it on me. When I'm dead, I want to stay dead.
Oh, that's foolish, Ed. Well, if I die first, I want David to use me for a subject.
Ruth.
Don't look so startled, Ed. She's always been my strongest supporter, but I'm not going to use her as a subject. I like her too well as a wife.
Still, it gives me the shivers to hear you talk that way, Ruth.
Well, why? I've seen David's work grow to where the technique is perfect. Before long, his experiments will be recognized by the whole medical world. And if I can help him achieve that goal, I'm willing to do anything. Living or dead. I mean it.
She said she wanted to do it, Ed, living or dead.
David, you're surely not going to hold her to that. Not now.
Of course I am. She meant it.
But
I called you over here tonight, Ed, because I need help.
don't tell me that.
But I want you to help me bring Ruth's... To bring her here? That's exactly what I mean.
David,
Will you help me? Or must I bribe some stranger?
David, why don't you give this thing up? It's inhuman.
Ed, if I succeed, I'll have Ruth back. Don't you see how much it means?
Well, yes, if you're successful.
Oh, I've no doubt about that. Look, I've got my laboratory record. 714 times I performed the experiment on guinea pigs, rabbits, monkeys. 714 times it's been successful. Don't you see?
But, David, this is no laboratory experiment. Ruth was your wife.
She is my wife. The only woman I ever loved. That's why I want to bring her back here and start her breathing and living again.
There's an ugly name for what you're asking me to do, David.
I know. Grave robbery. But there's a better name for it, Ed. Death robbery. We'll rob old man Death. Kick the door shut. On the operating table.
I must say you're completely equipped.
It's surgery just as well as a lab. Everything we need is here.
There. Well, it's done.
Not yet.
You mean you want me to stay?
Ed, listen. Ever since Ruth... Well, I guess I've leaned on you for everything. I won't ask you to stay, but I do need you. Just a little longer.
All right, David. I'll stay.
Ruth will be the first to thank you when we succeed.
David, I'll always doubt this until I see Ruth living, breathing, smiling again.
It won't be long, just a matter of 15 or 20 minutes.
If nothing happens. What will you do if your operation doesn't work?
Then you'll have just one more job to do as my friend.
And that?
Will be to bury both of us.
Oh, now look, David.
If Ruth isn't alive again within a few minutes, I'll have lost her forever. And I'll have proved that my whole life's work is useless. I'll have reason enough to use any of a dozen tricks that any good surgeon knows. End the whole business. Oh, but don't look so horrified, Ed. We won't fail. Let's begin.
I should remind you once more, David, that you're usurping powers that belong to God Almighty.
I like to think that Providence has wisely held back the knowledge of things like this until we knew how to use them, and I know how. Hand me that large beaker.
All right. I'm not going to back out on you, David. What shall I do?
Do. You'll work as you haven't worked in surgery before. Thank heavens I've got your skill on my side. Now then, first strap the sphygmomanometer on her arm.
I just happened to think of something.
Keep moving. This is all a matter of timing.
Yeah, but, David...
Here are your instruments. And I want the incision right here where I'm shaving the hair. Make a small incision just at the fontanelle while I prepare the solution.
David, have you considered...
Please, work fast.
But, Dave...
What?
She was embalmed, you know.
Of course I know that. I've something to replace the blood and counteract the fluid.
It's ghastly.
Finish the cut. I know what I'm doing.
Well, that's all for the incision, but after all...
Good work, nice. Now cut away the dura mater.
Entirely? Leave the brain exposed?
Yes, I'll fix that. I've done it 700-odd times.
Well, this is no guinea pig or monkey.
Well, I hardly need reminding.
Sorry. What's that?
A compound I've synthesized myself.
What is it?
I call it digamma-paradamine. Oh, I know that isn't chemically correct, but it's as close as I can get to it. I knew that something like it must exist. It took 3 years to track it down. It took me that long to make the first drop of it.
Oh, you know what you're doing, all right.
Yes, I do. Now then, if you're finished, take the leads from that storage battery there and attach the positive to the silver plate on the shelf. Put that at her feet.
I feel as if I were doing something unholy.
Place the tip of the negative in the incision you made in the skull. Be sure the tip of the wire actually penetrates the pia mater.
David, what if you bring her back?
I will bring her back.
But what if you bring her back and find she comes back without her soul?
What? Her soul?
Yes.
You're a surgeon, and you believe in a soul?
Well, I hesitate to say there is no such thing.
You've seen a good many deaths, haven't you? Have you ever seen any evidence that the soul escapes at death?
Perhaps I couldn't recognize the evidence.
Put it this way, then. If there is any soul, it either leaves the body or stays with it at death. Now, no reputable surgeon or physician has ever been able to report the slightest evidence of the soul's having left the body. So, the soul, if there is a soul, must stay with the body, a part of it. I'm ready now, if you've finished.
Everything's set.
Good. Close that switch, then, at the battery. Watch the meter and keep the current between plus and minus 5 of 150. There's a rheostat on the edge of the table. All right?
All right.
Now, I'm going to inject 10 cc's of adrenaline in the brachial artery.
Adrenaline?
Adrenaline and something else. There. God, she's beautiful, Ed.
Yes. She was.
She is. You'll see her in a few minutes, just as she was.
I wonder what you'll have to tell us.
Nothing. Death is only a transcendental sleep.
Do you really believe that, Dave?
Oh, well, what's the difference? How's the current?
Let's see. What? It's jumped to 180.
Good. Bring it back to 150. That's the result of the injection.
On a dead body?
Let's say suspended animation. There are still a few things in surgery you don't know, aren't there?
I never dreamed of a reaction like that.
I'll show you more. Help me swing this lamp over here.
But...
Let the ammeter go. It'll hold steady for a minute now.
But it might jump again.
No, it won't. I've been all through this before. The reactions are exactly the same as the others.
Not this lamp. X-rays?
No, it's a modification of the cathode ray. And just another of my developments. I call these theta rays.
Why do you call them that?
Well, most rays are named for the first few letters in the Greek alphabet. Alpha, beta, gamma, and so on.
Well, that explains theta. Didn't you say theta?
Yes. But theta was called the letter of death by the ancient Greeks.
Well, that's right. It was the first letter in the word thanatos. Death. I see. A theta without death.
Maybe I was too sentimental.
Maybe. At least human for once.
Let's not argue. Here goes the ray. Now, quickly. The solution.
Inject it?
No, pump it. I built this pump especially for it. There's the pump switch, Ed.
Here?
Yeah. Turn it on. And watch the ammeter.
Okay. It's jumping.
How far?
155.
Let it go.
160. 170.
Hold it there. It'll stay there now. Listen carefully.
Yes.
As soon as I turn off the pump, I want sphygmo readings.
But there won't be any blood pressure.
Wait and see. Give me a reading each time I ask for it and take them carefully. Are you ready?
This is fantastic. I'm ready.
Okay. Reading.
Systolic 0. Diastolic 0.
That's all right. It'll take a few seconds. Now.
40.
My God. Diastolic. Hurry.
0.
Aortic valve is still open. I'll turn off the ray. Reading.
48. Over 42. David.
Not yet. Now the stopwatch. 7 seconds after I say go, I want the systolic. Now you have it?
Right.
Ready. Now, go.
$60.
Good. Just what it should be. Lord, look at my hand.
Well, I don't wonder.
Oh, darling, just a few more minutes. All right, Ed. Now the ray again. We'll know the answer very soon.
The second act of Lights Out, starring Boris Karloff, will follow in just a moment. But now, listen to the sweetest shaving song ever written. Push-pull, click-click. Changes blades that quick. Push-pull, click-click. With the Eversharp Schick Injector Razor, yes, it clicks for men everywhere. Because the Eversharp Schick Injector Razor is the world's one and only razor with the automatic blade changer. No blades to unwrap. Fingers never touch the blade. Just push-pull, click-click. And a keen new blade is automatically locked in correct shaving position instantly. It clicks because the Eversharp Schick Injector Razor makes shaving 50% faster, 100% safer, 200% smoother. Just try the Eversharp Schick Injector Razor for 1 week. See for yourself the difference. It's a $1.75 value. Special now, only $1.25, complete with 20 blades. For the shave of your life, the rest of your life, switch to an Eversharp Schick Injector Razor. Get yours tomorrow. Push-pull, click-click. Buy an Eversharp Schick.
How long do you use the ray this time, David?
Not long. Give me a reading.
68. Over 67.
Now.
70.
Diastolic.
68.
Now.
David, 118. 76.
Close. Now.
120. That's it. 80.
The stethoscope. Quick. Here. Listen.
Still asleep?
Yes, almost a coma.
She's all right otherwise?
As far as I can tell, her respiration's normal, pulse just a tiny bit fast, and the reflex is slow, but apparently all right.
David, I feel I must apologize to you.
Apologize? Why?
Well, for doubting you, I suppose.
You'll learn to believe me.
I'm very calm in the face of all this. Do you realize that you've performed a miracle?
A miracle? I brought my wife back to me, as I promised her.
It's an unholy thing, but...
But we've conquered death. Is that unholy?
We have conquered death. May God forgive us.
She'll only wait now.
How long has she been asleep?
Let me see. 11 hours.
Hasn't spoken at all?
Not since that first scream, when she fell asleep.
Have you given her anything?
Just a few drops of brandy.
Have you tried to wake her?
No, but I think I'll try now.
Oh, wait a minute before you do.
Why?
Well, I hate to keep harping on this business about a soul, David. I realize this is no place for a philosophic discussion, but I can't help wondering why Ruth screamed when she first came back to life.
I think there's a logical explanation. After all, it must have been a physical shock.
That's true. It must also be true that there was a great mental shock involved. I think that's why she screamed, and I'm wondering whether there's been a permanent effect on her mind. Or, as I prefer to think of it, her soul.
Oh, you're simply borrowing trouble, Ed. I've never seen any sign of permanent damage in my other experiments.
Don't forget that Ruth was a human being.
Well, there's only one way to find out. I'm going to wake her.
You're not afraid?
Afraid? Of what? Ruth. Ruth. Wake up, darling. Ruth, dear. It's David speaking. Wake up, dearest. Ruth. Ruth. There, darling. No wonder it scared a poor girl. Ruth, it's David, dear. I kept my promise and you're alive again. Oh, you're all right, honey. It's David. You're... Ruth. Ruth.
David, what's the matter?
God, Ed, her mind.
No, David. Her soul. David, you'd better go out for a little exercise now.
I'll stay here with her.
I'll stay while you go out and walk around a bit. You've been there with her since 8 o'clock last night without any let-up. Go on, I'll stay.
Ed.
I know, old boy. I'd give anything myself if we could undo what we've done, but...
Ed, what can I do?
Well, there may be something. Let's try an experiment when she wakes up again.
What kind of an experiment?
Well, let's see if we can talk to her. Get her to say anything. If we can get a flicker of intelligence, maybe we can teach her. Build up from a small fragment.
Maybe it might work. I'm going to wake her up and try it.
But not now. Why don't you take a walk? Relax a little. And get something to eat while you're out.
Eat? I can't eat. I'm going to wake her. Ruth. Ruth.
David, why not let her sleep?
She's waking up now. Ruth. Hello, Ruth. Are you waking up? Poor child.
Poor child.
There.
She repeats after me. A little. Maybe it will work, Ed. Ruth. David. It works.
Seems to. Ruth, say I want a glass of water.
Seems to.
I want a glass of water.
Water.
It's too long for a... Ruth. Say, Ruth
Ruth
loves
loves
David.
David.
Ruth loves David.
Ruth loves David.
Ruth loves David.
Ruth loves David. Ruth loves David.
It's working, Ed.
Maybe. But what is she thinking?
I don't know.
No.
Stop it!
Stop it.
Wait a minute, old man.
Ruth
This is
loves
too much for you, tired as you are. Go on out and take a little walk, and I'll work with it for a while.
Stop.
Your nerves won't take much of this.
Oh, I guess
Stop.
you're right, Ed. I can't think
Ruth
anymore.
loves
I'll be right back.
David.
Fine. I'll take good care of her and see what I can find out.
Be patient with me.
Don't worry, I will. And you get something to eat while you're out.
All right, I'll try.
Poor guy, this is really rough on him.
Rough on him.
Ruth.
Ruth.
We're kidding ourselves. There's nothing there. She's a parrot.
Dad.
Never mind, Ruth. Ruth, put on that scalpel. You'll hurt yourself. Ruth, stay away. Don't put it down. Think of David.
Ed.
Here, Dave.
Ed, for God's sake, what happened?
Ruth. Scalpel.
I'll get something and fix you right up.
Wait. No use.
Now, look.
Doctor. Artery. No hope.
Ed. All right, Doctor. Your diagnosis is correct.
A minute or two left. Ruth's hiding. Watch out. No soul. She'll kill you, too.
What have I done, Ed? Everything I've done is wrong.
Oh, wonderful technique, Doctor. Congratulations. What about soul?
Ed. Ruth. She's somewhere in the house. What if she gets out and a scalpel in her hands? There's been enough damage. Ruth! Ruth! Basement. I'd better take a gun. Ruth! Ruth! Wish I had more light. Ruth! Ruth!
Listen.
Ruth, now give me that scalpel. You'll hurt yourself. Ruth!
Ruth loves David.
Ruth, come back!
Ruth loves David.
Come back! Hello? Yes? Oh. Hello, Doctor. Well, I've been busy in the lab. No, there's nothing new. Just an experiment. No. Like so many experiments, it just didn't work out.
Eversharp Schick has just presented Boris Karloff in the first of the new series of mystery and terror stories, Lights Out. In just a moment, we'll tell you about next week's story. But first, no matter what kind of razor you use now, here's a challenge. There's a better, easier, faster way to shave. Eversharp Schick Injector Razor has banished forever 90% of the nuisance that makes shaving such a chore. Ends nuisance number 1. No time wasted. Eversharp Schick Injector Razor has been proved at least 50% faster. Ends nuisance number 2. It's safer. Patented guard bar prevents skin irritation, even under nose. Eversharp Schick shaves clean and smooth without skin irritation. Ends nuisance number 3. Nothing to take apart or put together. World's easiest razor to clean. Just rinse, shake, put away. Ends nuisance number 4. No blades to unwrap. Fingers never touch the blade. Just push-pull, click-click. Because Eversharp Schick's the world's one and only razor with the automatic blade changer that locks a keen new blade, the world's sharpest blade, in correct shaving position instantly. Yes, it's 50% faster, 100% safer, 200% smoother. So for the world's quickest, easiest, cleanest shave, change to Eversharp Schick Injector Razor. It's $1.75 value, but special now for only $1.25, complete with 20 blades. Buy yours tomorrow. Next week, Lights Out will bring you a story about the undead, the vampires who are doomed to wander alone through all eternity, seeking the blood of innocent ones. Be sure to listen next Wednesday night at the same time. Lights Out is produced and directed by Bill Lawrence. The script is by Paul Pierce and Willis Cooper. This is Ken Niles speaking for Eversharp, manufacturers of Eversharp Schick Injector razors and blades, and famous Eversharp precision writing instruments. For birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, and business gifts, remember the best gift of all is an Eversharp CA pen. Buy yours tomorrow during the sensational Eversharp CA pen sale. Buy now and save as much as 60%. This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
That was Death Robbery from Lights Out, here on the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society podcast. Once again, I'm Eric.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Joshua.
That came to us from a listener, Zachary, who made that recommendation, who also says, I started listening when episode 37, which I'm so glad for, because 1 through 36 are probably pretty terrible.
That's the sweet spot to join.
Right? As we were figuring out how this podcast worked, I always wonder if someone listens to it and goes, oh, I like that, and then they go back to number 1 and go, what? What were they doing?
That is all podcasts, I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I've never listened to any of our podcasts, so I don't know if they sound different.
Well, it's like screaming monkeys most of the time.
So thank you, Zachary, for the suggestion. And I learned something just fascinating in the intro that I didn't know about that third iteration of Lights Out and them pulling the plug on it. And this is the only surviving copy, and that this really represents to fans the intent and what they probably sounded like under Willis Cooper back in the day. And so all of that is fascinating.
So ironically, it is the latest surviving episode of Lights Out that represents the earliest of Lights Out.
Right.
And Lights Out was technically canceled. It never returned to the radio after that canceled
This is
run.
one of the episodes that just nailed the coffin shut.
Yep, it was the premiere episode.
So where do I begin? First of all, Karloff reading the phone book would be great for me, right? Like, oh, God, I love Karloff. Great story. Well done. I didn't think I could listen to surgery that long, but that was 20 minutes of surgery.
I had that same experience. I mean, many of the same experiences. I did not know this was like the episode that best represents Cooper's peak achievements in those early Lights Out, and it makes total sense. And when listening to it, I sort of settled in of like, all right, I get the gist of the story. Boris Karloff, I like Boris Karloff. I'm probably in for a pleasant time. And then it digs into the nuts and bolts of the surgery, and it goes on and on. I'm really fascinated, and I no longer really care about anybody's relationships. All I care is about the details of the surgery.
Like, normally, like, if I was writing, most normal writers, I should say, would skip through, all right, we did the surgery, now let's get to the point of what happened, right?
Like we'll bring the dead by injecting them with this serum. Blah. All right, we skipped over all that.
Right. The detail of how it works, it was fascinating, and to the point of, I do believe this is real.
One of the things I enjoyed about the surgery scene is it starts with the line, oh, don't worry, this will take 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm like, wow, this is like LASIK surgery. This is going to be nothing. And I thought that line was there to tell us we're just going to skip past this.
Right, exactly.
But no, it takes 10 to 15 minutes, so the surgery happens in real time.
Yeah.
It is literally a third or a little more than a third of this story.
Yeah.
And that's pretty gutsy.
And in my head, I thought that, like, this is taking a little bit of a page out of the Frankenstein movie. Mm-hmm. One of the main things people remember out of that movie is all the equipment and the lab and the lightning and the scene of bringing him to life, more so than the plot of who, that he had a fiancée and there was
Right.
and to really
Tossing children into a lake.
yes, but just the nuts and bolts of the process.
Yeah, and to be fair, the Frankenstein movie, that was far more exciting, the process, with all the
Yes,
electrodes and the lightning and the explosions and all of that. This was just surgery. And I would say 9 out of 10 times I'd be sitting right now going, yeah, that was a terrible idea. That was boring and stupid. And why was it so fascinating? I will say, caveats, it did get a little much of how many times he protested. Like, oh, we're going against God's will and we shouldn't be doing this. Like, that was, do you know what you're doing? Must have been asked 1,000. Yes, I know what I'm doing. So there was some repetitiveness to it that could have been cut from the dialogue, being really picky, by the way, because it did move and was super interesting.
And then in a very Willis Cooper way, it grounds the whole idea of you believe, like, yes, he did this process, a person was brought back to life. So then the final act is really credible. You really, really believe that this thing, it's not just a person acting funny or weird.
Right.
It really is. Like, that person was dead for quite some time.
And you know all the various things they did to the body.
Yes.
The granular detail, the ghoulish delight he takes in describing everything and adding all those sounds, because we have the blood pressure, so we hear that compression all the time. We hear the clinking of the surgical tools, the injections. And although I agree with you, Eric, that there is some perhaps repetition in Ed's objections, they do cover a lot of interesting ground that, as Tim says, really sets us up for not only how horribly things go wrong, but also for Ed's vindication at the end, because he has those great final lines that are just dripping with sarcasm. He says something like,
Oh, nice job bringing your wife back from the dead. Was that it?
he essentially says that.
You're such a good doctor.
He does.
Bravo.
He does say, "Wonderful technique, doctor. Congratulations." I mean,
Asshat.
and then twist the knife with "What about soul?" So, I thought that was unexpected. I didn't think his dying words would be to essentially spit in his face.
Right.
And then with that last act, that was so good.
Yeah. I didn't know exactly where this was going to go, and yet I knew exactly where this is going to go. In fact, before we get to that last act, I do want to bring up something before that. I love the establishment of her death. Yeah. Really simple, really clean. Just a car crash sound. And that's all we needed to know what happened. Now, it is set up for us with her going, I hope I die and you bring me back to life. That is set up.
But that's Cooper recognizing he set it up so he doesn't need more than the sound.
The sound comes and we go, great. We don't need to know where she was going or why or anything.
There's another great example of that, not quite as overt as the car crash, but it's when they come back from the cemetery with her body. And you hear the howling, cold, bitter wind, and they slam the door. And just the sound of that wind, even though we didn't have a scene at the cemetery, you picture this German expressionist film of them in silhouette in the graveyard digging it up just with the sound of that wind.
Yes.
So Cooper is very familiar with what tropes he's playing with and where he can take shortcuts. And those shortcuts also buys him the time to do something so unexpected like a real-time 15-minute operation.
Right. Jumping on what I was about to say and you bringing up tropes, there's nothing really fascinatingly shocking about what the story is. We know kind of where it's going. We know what's happening. Yet, it also was unexpected. I can't quite explain what I'm trying to say.
The way
It's something
it's
in
done
here-
is unexpected.
Right.
It's something in this we almost never, ever really get in a classic radio show. It's a jump scare.
Yeah.
To have her laugh, like distant, then suddenly right in your ear.
On that note, Tuttle.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was truly terrifying to listen to her.
I haven't heard anything like it. I mean, that weird, gibbering, slack-jawed, lunatic baby talk. I mean, like...
Thing on the Forble board.
Yeah.
Slight reminder of that.
It's a little proto-Mike from Forble board.
Yep.
For sure. And it reminded me of, it's not the same as, but it reminded me of Mercedes McCambridge's performance in The Exorcist.
Oh, yeah.
I have directed many sort of suspenseful horror sorts of production things on stage, and I've more than once come against that, trying to talk to an actor about what it is that makes one person intimidating to another person.
Right.
Without like threat of violence or anything, just like your physical presence, the way you use your voice. What is it about this person that makes them intimidating to someone else? And it's very ephemeral, and it's very much here in this performance.
So let me piggyback on that and jump to this conclusion. To me, this entire story is about the other doctor being correct. This is what we are. If you don't have a soul, this is what we become. Like, I don't think it was brain damage from the surgery or something that went wrong. I just think when you take the soul, we become that.
I think that's the story point, right?
Good.
Because he
Okay.
says specifically, I've succeeded 714 times, but with rabbits and guinea pigs.
Right. So you wouldn't know if they didn't
The
have
only
them.
difference being the presumption that the animals do not have souls.
Right. So they would come back just fine. So you take our soul, and we find everything hilarious.
But it was interesting, too,
Please
that
take my soul.
Boris Karloff's character, David, was on the fence about the soul, right? He's like, well, there's no evidence
Right.
that it leaves the body, so even if you're right and there is a soul, it probably just stays there.
Right.
So he was just going to go the scientific route, and let's just see. And he saw.
There is something, a warm, nostalgic blanket of Karloff's voice. Forget everything we talked about. That dude's voice and that slight lisp of his is just, I could listen to him all day.
Well, I don't know how much. In my head, these actors are always just being handed these scripts and like, okay, you're ready in half an hour or go now. And
Right.
his performance is so spot on, perfect. Timing is 100% crisp, and like it's. I'm struggling. It's worthy of any stage production that you've rehearsed for 3 months for.
Exactly. And I know from our research and from what we've learned, they weren't rehearsing these radio shows like a stage play. And a lot of it was, here's a script, get in the studio. Even if they did a run through earlier that day, this is amazing work.
They certainly rehearsed and it was directed, but not
Yes.
for months. I think
No.
maybe once.
Yeah,
or
that's
twice.
what I'm getting at. They were cranking out, and a lot of these actors are going from show to show to show. I'm sure it was an afternoon run, some direction, and then get in there and do it live. You know, you get your fumbles and your stammerings now and then, so you know it's live, and that's impressive as well.
One of the things that I thought was particularly terrifying in the concept of the resurrected Ruth was the whole ability to parrot speech.
Yeah.
But that it's just meaningless. It's just sound. And then obviously they use the word parrot as well in there. So they're trying to make that comparison between animal and human.
Side note, Love Comes to Professor Gildia has destroyed the word parrot for me forever. Because every time I hear the word parrot, I think Paul Frees. That's totally sidetracked. Isn't that weird?
But with that, it's a nice bit of the story to have what you want to get her to say. When she doesn't say it right, air quotes, it comes back to you in a really horrifying way.
Mm-hmm. I also think, speaking of Karloff's performance, it's an interesting and very stark contrast to some of his other Lights Out performances, which are much bigger.
Yeah.
This is very understated and, again, fits
Good point.
this doctor's personality, David. Right? This is his cold, logical, pure research scientist. And if you contrast this with the end of Catwife, where John also has to kill his wife, Linda. Linda, right? It's very over the top. But here, he just rather unceremoniously shoots her dead.
Yeah.
And that last line when he says, someone calls him and asks him about his work, it's like so many experiments, it didn't work out.
Yeah,
so it's him.
Far cry from the, you also did 2 graves.
Yeah. He, in that moment, admits that he didn't lose his wife when he just shot her. Mm-hmm. He lost her in the car crash.
Yeah.
And he also probably recognized, or maybe the director recognized, like, contrast between the just bat poop crazy Tuttle performance and David's reactions. Because if he's losing his mind and over emotional, then it's just 2 raving people. So it just worked really well, I thought.
The main experience was, I thought going into it, like, I got a sense of what Boris Karloff Lights Out episodes are, and it was such a treat to be 100% wrong. I don't know what this is. I don't know how crazy this will get.
I do want to say this. Every time I hear Karloff's voice, I'm going to do this pitch. That Rankin and Bass Halloween special that no one knows about Monster Island is fantastic. You should all watch it. It's that long-forgotten Rankin and Bass Halloween special. Monster Island, it's a movie, it's 2.5 hours. And this, hearing his voice, made me go, ooh, come on, Halloween, hurry up, get here. Also, because it's 1,000 degrees and I want the temperature to drop and it to be fall.
The last thing I wanted to mention is that for some reason, as they kept doing these summer series of Lights Out and resurrecting it like Ruth, they kept trying to do new intros to Lights Out. And it was always like, why? You have one of the most perfect, beautifully simple intros to a horror radio show ever devised. And in this one, we get all this overwrought purple prose. Loathsome, horrible death and all this stuff. And when they could just go,
Lights Out.
Yeah. Yes. His Lights Out was delivered really quickly. It was almost had like a Shatner-esque quality. Like, Lights Out.
Yeah. It went from, hey, everybody, lights out, click, click, pop, push. You know, like they went right into the sponsor really fast.
Which adds a lot of validity to the story of the sponsor being shocked, which is why it was canceled. Because they clearly, by the tone of their advertising and everything, thought that this was just going to be a popular, fun, maybe slightly suspenseful radio show. And instead it's Lorraine Tuttle going,
How about the end of it? When they're wrapping it up and that really, really upbeat, fun music is at the end. And he's like, hey, join us next week. Vampires, they never die. The living dead are going to come back. You know, like it was just so upbeat after listening to that horrible radio show, that music they chose for the end and talking over it and then introducing this next horrible script. Who's running the ship here? That's a terrible idea.
Oh, but after this, I really wish that next script survived.
Yeah, right? Because I wanted to hear that. But you're absolutely right. That is such an example of the sponsor getting involved going, and now we need happy, upbeat music, and you'll talk, like, no, it doesn't, it's jarring, the end of that.
Yeah. Well, that used to make Arch Obler angry, too.
Yeah,
he did not
terrible.
like sponsors breaking up his show, so...
Well, did it catch any of you, that music at the end, where you're like, wow, after listening to all that, and now I'm on a Calliope Ferris wheel ride.
It's also 1947, so commercial music is changing a lot. It's getting closer to that really upbeat, jingly 1950s style.
It was just terrible. It should just be a...
Shave with a shick.
Or die trying. What's their votes?
Yeah, classic. Absolutely one of the best things I've ever listened to. I love every single thing about this. If you gave this to me, I would have about a 4-minute meeting of a couple of lines that I would cut Other than that, I would have no notes for the actors, like it was just great. That was really fantastic. Classic.
Yeah, especially knowing the context now. I may have been, without that, on the fence of maybe not a classic, but an excellent show and it stands the test of time. But knowing now, like anyone who listens to radio, like you have to listen to this. You have to know to have this in your belt.
Yeah, I think Laureen Tuttle's performance alone earns it a classic status, at least in the context of old-time radio horror, because that's a standout, unique performance.
Gruesome.
And it's so fun because it has a lot of these lofty philosophical themes that it shares with great horror classics like Frankenstein and The Monkey's Paw. It reminded me a lot of The Monkey's Paw.
Yeah.
But it also just delivers plain old white-knuckle chills, right? Like
Yep.
Tim said, jump scare. And Karloff's understated performance. And, yeah, classic. Thank you, Zachary.
Yeah, thank you so much, man, for bringing this to our attention. And I feel dumb that we didn't know of it before.
Well, I knew of it before.
Well, Joshua knows everything. Let's stay. I feel
Smarter
dumb
now that I know of it.
Wait, let me just wrap this up. I feel dumb all the time. Tim, tell him stuff.
Please go visit ghoulishdelights.com, home of this podcast. You can find other episodes there. All of them, even the first 36, which we assume are subpar. You can leave comments on episodes. You can send us messages. You can vote in polls to let us know what you think of these. You can also link to our social media pages. You can also you can get swag from our Threadless store, and you can join our Patreon.
Yes, go to patreon.com/themorals, and for the love of God, support this podcast. What is wrong with you people?
Do you not have a soul? Come on.
Ruth loves David.
That's pretty good.
You're welcome.
Let's do this on stage.
Yes, please go to patreon.com. We really do appreciate all our supporters who support us right now and all our future supporters who are listening. Although I have a new idea for a Patreon perk, and that is us going back and listening to our first 36 episodes and commenting on it. So maybe we'll add that.
Meta. Now knowing that Joshua does that impression of the woman from this so well, I do think we should perform this live on stage, and you get to do that.
Yay!
Speaking of our live performances, you can see us performing live. We do audio theater, classic recreations of classic old-time radio shows, and a lot of our own original work. You can find out where we're performing every month, which we have been by going to ghoulishdelights.com or mysteriousOldRadioListeningSociety.com. There you'll see what we're performing this month and where we are. If you can't make it to our shows live, we do live stream them. Or perhaps just being a Patreon, you get a recording of that absolutely free. So become a Patreon and you can see our live performances as well. I'd like to point out that here in 2022, the summer, we are moving to the Bryant Lake Bowl Theater in Minneapolis. So look for that, and we'll be back there in September of this year. We're very excited about that. What's coming up next?
Next is your pick, Eric.
That's right. We're doing another episode of Escape, because I can't help myself. And we're doing Conqueror's Isle. Until then.
Look out!
Wonderful technique, Doctor. Congratulations.
Asshat.